And I would like to hand over now to Georg Weininger, a political scientist with a focus on human rights and international affairs. And he'll be speaking about the challenges, the current challenges of UNRWA, but also like the situation, how this organization evolved. And we will very much focus on like what the situation is nowadays. And I will physically give him my chair. So this might take 2 seconds. And second, you'll be seeing another guy sitting in front of this camera.
Hey friends, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be part of this distinguished panel. Maybe a short introduction to my person. I am a graduate student. I just graduated actually from Hattie School and wrote my master thesis on the financial crisis at UNRWA. This is what actually brings me here. And yeah, I would like to start right away. So I was asked to introduce you briefly to the organization called UNRWA. I would divide this presentation into 3 main topics. So I'm tackling history, the organization's evolution, and point to the main challenges I identify. So let's start with this. Who's UNRWA is my first slide, and I will give you some facts and figures and point to a leading question. The second slide will tackle the background of UNRWA's establishment. Thirdly, I will speak about the establishment of UNRWA itself, and then, as I said, come to challenges and consequences I identify. So, who's UNRWA? It's a subsequent body of the United Nations General Assembly, and it has, as we saw in Lex' awesome presentation, it has a distinguished, a very special agenda. It is responsible, it's the only agency, UN agency, responsible for a defined group of people, for the refugees from Palestine. I'll come to this point. And it is, as Lex already mentioned, founded in 1949. So some 70 years later, it caters for about 5.6 million refugees. And its area of operation is limited to 4 countries, including Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the occupied territories of Palestine. It includes some 30,000 staff. It runs over 700 schools and about or close to 150 health facilities. The agency does all of that with an annual budget of roughly $1 billion US dollars. So what happened 2 years ago, or to be exact, 1.5 years ago, in 2018, the US administration announced to cease their funding. This came to the surprise of many due to the fact that the United States was, up to this point, one of the most reliable and important backers of UNRWA. It did not lead to the ceasing of UNRWA's operations, as many might have expected, as the US contributions amounted to 1/3 of UNRWA's budget at this point. It didn't lead to the cancellation, but only because some other major donors stepped in the very forefront here, to mention Germany and the European Union. So the leading question at this point is, how did it come so far? What motivated the US to defund a humanitarian organization? Most of you will sense it already. It's political interests, but again, what political interests can would contradict the agenda of a humanitarian organization? To answer this question, we'll have to rewind to the background and talk about UNRWA's or the background of UNRWA's establishment. So as Lex told us already, it goes back to 1947 when the UN General Assembly passed its Resolution 181, and here within the partition plan. It took the General Assembly about another year, and a very much deteriorating situation on the ground, certainly for the refugees, to pass another resolution establishing an international body to take politically care of the matter. And so Resolution 194 established the United Nations Conciliation Commission for Palestine. This agency has a distinguished political mandate, and I quote, "It is mandated to assist the governments and authorities concerned to achieve a final settlement of all questions outstanding between them," and referring to the refugees themselves, to facilitate and the repatriation, the resettlement, and economic and social rehabilitation. In particular, on the matter of refugees, again, Resolution 194 states that those refugees wishing to return to their homes and live at peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date. This indeed became one of the most important legal reference points for the soon proverbial right of return. However, neither the resettlement nor the right of return went down as planned, or went down well, as we already saw with Lex Takkenberg. But instead, the situation further deteriorated. So it took the General Assembly another year, and in 1949, as I said in the beginning, the General Assembly decided to establish another international body. So the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East was created. UNRWA is an agency with a totally different mandate. Its mandate is actually limited, or is actually written in two sentences of this Resolution 302. The first sentence points or mandates UNRWA to basically issue the humanitarian work, and the second one to consult with Near Eastern governments about the time when international financiation is not available anymore. So the mandate is temporary by definition, as it was limited to 2 years, and later on it became prolonged for at the beginning 2 years, and later 3 years at a time. And this is the modus operandi until the very day. It was not only temporary, but also complementary to the political mandate of the UNCCP. So to say, the humanitarian side of the the equation. And once UNRWA was established and started its humanitarian work, it concentrated on the two aspects represented in its name, work and relief. The aspect work might surprise some because it's unusual probably, but it refers to domestic experiences in the US in which the United States succeeded to resettle large parts of populations when they established mega industrial undertakings. So those designers, those planners and founders of UNRWA thought kind of to replicate this experience and resettle Palestinian refugees in the adjacent countries by those industrial undertakings. It didn't work out as we saw or as we know, and soon thereafter UNRWA started to concentrate on the relief aspect. However, the fact that it didn't work out with this large-scale resettlement programs, the UNCCP got defunded, meaning the US ceased their fundings. And UNRWA basically remained the de facto only international body serving these refugees. This is a decisive moment. So we have to keep in mind UNCCP is defunded, and the humanitarian side of the equation, as I said, remains the only aspect or the only running system. So this is the first main challenge I would identify, saying that after the demise of the UNCCP, UNRWA's mandate was not altered in any way, and it was not given an explicit mandate to take over the pursuit of durable solutions for the refugees, which actually resulted in the protection gap we are facing today. And we could highlight at this point the search for durable solutions failed to materialize. Secondly, the second big challenge for UNRWA's operation today is that UNRWA's funding system is insufficient to its duties. So UNRWA's funding system is depending on voluntary contribution mainly, meaning 98%, and it didn't keep pace. Like the contributions didn't keep pace with the growth of refugees and their needs. And this is not a new phenomena, but already in the beginning of the 1960s, the then Commissioner General of UNRWA demanded a change in this funding system, demanded to change it to a larger contribution, a larger part of assessed contributions from the regular UN budget, but major donor states rejected a reform that way, and they keep rejecting it until this very day, with the argument that it would increase the overall UN's budget. So, coming to the consequences, we saw now the challenges, and as we know from Lex contribution, is that UNRWA had to take over responsibility not only for refugees, but in most cases for stateless refugees. If we dive into the discourse around UNRWA, we oftentimes find the term "the blue state." It's used cynically in most of the times, but actually it refers to a truth that UNRWA kind of developed into a huge, what I call quasi-state for the refugees. So we have in mind that the refugees are stateless, and UNRWA took over responsibilities of a welfare state, like education, health, housing, and also representing the refugees' interests in the international sphere. So this is basically governments or a quasi-state for the refugees. But due to the fact of the insufficient funding system, this quasi-state is forced to operate in a constant state of emergency. This fact makes the agency very much vulnerable to political interests. And now we can come back to the hook of the American defunding. So even though the defunding didn't lead to the closure of the agency, but only because other major donor states stepped in, this displays very much this this vulnerability. And in fact, like luckily, speaking from the perspective of UNRWA or the refugees, luckily other major donors stepped in, but it's a problem shifting and not solving, because all of us know that governments can change, or political interests and majorities can do so. So this is why I would close with a statement for discussion that UNRWA is not part of the solution, and such a solution must be found irrespective of UNRWA. Having said this, I would like to point to the fact that, of course, nothing is cast in stone, and UNRWA has the liberty to redefine its mandate. So thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Now we're two. Thank you so much for your valuable input, Georg. And I would now like to ask, I disappeared in the green screen. I would now like to ask Rania to comment on Georg's analysis before we start with questions.
Thanks, Christoph, and thanks, Georg. So Georg, thanks for your presentation and for outlining the background related to UNRWA, the current challenges that the agency is facing, and as you called it, the shortcomings that the agency faces today. To start off, I think it's important just to recall that, as Georg was just saying, UNRWA was established as a temporary agency. It was intended to complement the political goals of the UNCCP, or the UN Conciliation Commission for Palestine, which was in turn mandated to enable the exercise of the right of return of Palestinian refugees and internally displaced persons. So the idea was that UNRWA's functions were to seize once Palestinians were enabled their right of return, and that was supposed to be at the earliest practicable date, according to Resolution 194. But so in this vein, UNRWA was given a limited mandate to provide assistance to only those Palestinian refugees who, according to the UNRWA definition, had lost both homes and means of livelihood during the Nakba. And therefore they excluded further Palestinian refugees and internally displaced persons from the operational scope of the agency. But this does not mean that, that these individuals do not have refugee status under international law. So to turn now to the book by Francesca and Lex, which Francesca will of course be presenting in a moment, the book Palestinian Refugees in International Law examines what it is that UNRWA was mandated to do. And in particular, the authors look, for example, at cases where UNRWA was mandated not only to report on the situation of Palestinian refugees, but all those caught in conflict. This was the case, for example, during the First Intifada. The book also compellingly argues that UNRWA should not hide itself behind the humanitarian corner, and that the agency should, in fact, take a proactive role in order to achieve a just and durable solution for Palestinian refugees. But despite the challenges that we've just talked about and that Georg has listed that really face UNRWA at this very critical juncture, I think it's important to recall the role and the importance that UNRWA still plays in Palestinian society. As Palestinian human rights group Badil, for example, has put it, Palestinian refugees have been persistent in UNRWA's preservation. Badil observes, for example, that not only is UNRWA a symbolic agency and witness to the plight of Palestinian refugees, but it is also an international agency that is UN mandated to provide protection to Palestinian refugees, and therefore one that includes legal as well as rights-based protection.
Thank you, Rania. You mentioned a few things that will also be were also taken up in the questions, which I would like to read out now to Georg. We received 3 questions and we'll keep it for that now, as we're a bit short on time. The first question would be, are the Palestinian refugees who have fled again from Syria and who are still recognized as refugees in other places not any more concerned by UNRWA? First question. And of course, also the other speakers are always welcome to jump in if you have questions on that. I read these 2 others in a row, so you can comment on all of them. The next would be, do Palestinian stakeholders in any manner have influence on how UNRWA is operating? And if so, in which manner? Maybe Rania, you can also share your experiences. And last but not least, does UNRWA as an institution not reinforce the dependency of Palestinian refugees? So Georg, the floor is yours for the moment. And if Francesca, if Rania, if Lex want to add, just do so, please.
All right, so very briefly from my side, we have legal experts who are way more capable of answering some of these questions. But as far as I know, I will answer now. So the first question, UNRWA's operation is limited geographically, and this is what defines its operations. And as long Palestinian refugees are located in these in this area of operation, they are legitimate for the relief roles of UNRWA. Another thing is the registration. So wherever they go, they can still be registered as Palestinian refugees. So this is to the first question. The second question, if the Palestinian stakeholders have influence on UNRWA. Definitely there is an exchange. They consult in many occasions as UNRWA is operating in the same areas, but in fact, it's a UN agency with an international leadership. So when I said it includes 30,000 staff, this is what consists of teachers, medical personnel, all of that. But there's another layer of international leadership, some 200 or 180 staff. And this is an international body. So interestingly, I would point to the fact some scholars have raised that it is kind of it was kind of stabilizing UNRWA, the fact that they have this international leadership, so they didn't get kind of tracked into the Palestinian fractions and like the concerning struggles. So the third question concerning UNRWA as an institution reinforcing the dependency of Palestinian refugees, that's a very common common argument. I would say it's definitely important to discuss it. In fact, UNRWA is not forcing anyone to register with them. and it's also not therefore not reinforcing anything. But what I would still highlight is the fact that, as I showed, UNRWA has developed into a kind of a welfare state, which is in fact one of the biggest employers in the region. And obviously the region has little opportunities for so many people, which raises the concern that, of course, it creates some kind of dependency to its refugees. We can discuss that indeed.
Thank you, Georg. Do any of the other speakers want to comment of any of the questions?
Can I come in,
Lex,
Christoph,
yes,
very briefly on the two last questions? Let me start with the last one. And I agree, I'm not contradicting Georg, rather than complementing. With respect to sort of reinforcing dependency, I mean, the bulk of what UNRWA does and where the money goes is educating Palestinian refugees, basic education plus vocational training, and to a limited extent also scholarships for university and other advanced education, in addition to primary health care. Now, through that, the vast majority of the Palestinian refugees have succeeded to become independent, have become major factors in the economy of Jordan, in the economy of Syria, have contributed their expertise to the development of the Gulf countries in the 60s and the 70s through as labor migrants. And by the time the second Intifada started in around, in 2000, the second Palestinian uprising in 2000, 95% of Palestinian refugees were, totally financially independent. There was only 5% that were 5% of the registered refugee population that was in need of some sort of direct relief assistance, financial or food aid, and so UNRWA has really, has been a success story in supporting the independence of a refugee population. Where we see dependency on UNRWA dramatically increasing is where there is renewed conflict, in Gaza, the war in Lebanon, the civil war the civil war in Lebanon, the war in Syria. It's in all those situations of renewed conflict that dependency on the organization dramatically increased. But not because of the organization sort of, pulling that. On Palestinian influence on UNRWA, I think it is multifold. It is correct that UNRWA has an international leadership and is an instrument, is an intergovernmental organization, so it's an instrument through which, primarily donor countries exercise some of their responsibilities to the unresolved Palestinian question. But UNRWA operates, for its education. The organization has chosen to, has very early on entered in a strategic partnership with UNESCO, as part of which it has chosen to adopt the curriculum of the host countries, which means that everything we do in terms of education is in sync with what Palestine does in Gaza and the West Bank, with the Jordanian and Syrian and Lebanese ministries of education. 99% of the staff are Palestinians, not just teachers and doctors and nurses, but all middle management and a significant part of senior management are Palestinians. And then UNRWA, of course, also closely interacts with the political representatives of the Palestinians in the OPT. Palestine is also a member of the UNRWA Advisory Committee, through which there is interaction, not just with the Palestinians, but also with the other Arab host countries. So there is a very strong influence, and it makes also UNRWA a very complex organization. You have in the middle a Commissioner General, and then you have multiple accountabilities. There is an accountability to the Palestinians as the principal stakeholders. There is an accountability to the donors, to the UN. You know, the Commissioner General of UNRWA reports to the Secretary General. That's his immediate supervisor. Occupying authorities. You know, there is UNRWA needs the cooperation of Israel to bring goods and persons in and out of Gaza and the West Bank, and so there are multiple accountabilities, and that makes it a very complex organization to manage.
Thank you, Lex. Now, Francesca, you are. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I wanted to comment on Georg's presentation in the same spirit than Lex, more to complement rather than to challenge. I recognize the daunting task that Georg had in presenting UNRWA in 15 minutes, but one of the issues that I would like to stress is that when talking of challenges, probably focus on the financing aspects of the agency is not necessarily the best entry point, because for me, the main challenge that the agency faces is the growing number of Palestinian refugees, which is an organic fact of life. The lack of resolve, the continuous lack of resolve of the Palestinian refugee question, the lack of political will to put an end to this situation produces the protractedness of the refugee situation. And UNRWA remains responsible for these refugees because its mandate is tied to the solution of the Palestinian refugee question. This is established in the very resolution which created UNRWA, Resolution 302. The other thing is, as Lex said, UNRWA operates in a very difficult situation made of Lebanon being trapped in a spiraling economic, political, and humanitarian crisis, spiraling down economic, political, and humanitarian crisis. The West Bank and East Jerusalem under occupation, and so Gaza under blockade, and with 3 wars and continuous military operations over the span of a decade, and Syria raged by a terrible civil war. So Jordan is relatively stable, but this is the reality which UNRWA faces. The question of the mandate is crucial. UNRWA's mandate is much more complex than what enshrined in its founding resolution 302, and has evolved, as Rania was pointing out, has evolved over 72 years, because very much as UNHCR, UNRWA has intervened to fill a humanitarian gap and responding to a General Assembly and Security Council resolution. So its mandate has been adapting by very impulse of the United Nations, of course, of the General Assembly primarily, to meet the needs of the refugees. And in a way, because its role was ancillary to that of UNCCP, it has tried to fill as many gaps as it could. And of course, I mean, then I will have the chance to elaborate during my presentation on the question of, can UNRWA be more engaged on durable solution? But on this issue, I think I cannot agree with Georg when he says UNRWA is not part of the solution, and the solution is to be found independently from UNRWA. UNRWA, I mean, what happens to Palestinian refugees affects UNRWA, and what happens to UNRWA affects Palestinian refugees. And I would rather frame the question as UNRWA is not necessarily causing the problem. The problem is caused by the intransigence of Israel to accept the refugees to return to their homes, and the impossibility of realize other durable solutions elsewhere. as it has become a fact of life for the refugees. But UNRWA, I think, should play a greater role in making sure that the cause for justice of Palestinian refugees is upheld. Concerning the issue of dependency, again, I do not think that it's UNRWA creating dependency, it's rather the circumstances. And Palestinians have demonstrated their ability to their entrepreneurial spirit and their ability to stand and provide for themselves. And this brings me to answer the other question, how Palestinians have influenced the way UNRWA operates. Think of that at the beginning. This is just to discuss how UNRWA has never supported durable solutions. In the beginning, UNRWA was supposed to implement large-scale work schemes to to support Palestinian reintegration, although it was not called this way, into the economy of the nearest countries, of Arab countries. Palestinians rejected it because they understood that they were, as a durable solution was enforced upon them, while what they wanted was to return to their homes. So they have pushed back so as to have their UNRWA stopping and implementing those programs, and they have been very active in determining the way the services are provided and the way the programs are conceived.
Thank you for these additions, Francesca.